2 years after my grandfather died, I got a letter he left just for me. Halfway through reading it, I had to sit down. Everything I believed about my life changed. I was not expecting anything that morning. No big news. No packages. Just another slow Tuesday where the coffee tasted burnt and my inbox felt heavier than usual. Then the doorbell rang. It was a delivery guy, kind of bored-looking, holding a small box and a clipboard. "You Benjamin Hart?" he asked. I nodded, and he handed over the package. No explanation, no sender listed. Just my name scrawled in tight handwriting across a beige label, and the words, "Do not open until after," printed in bold, almost anxious letters along the side. After what? I flipped the box in my hands, searching for more. Nothing. No return address. Just a faint scent of tobacco and old paper. I figured maybe it was one of those time capsule things. A prank, or a delayed birthday gift. But when I peeled back the tape and lifted the flaps, I froze. Right on top was a letter. My name again, this time in that same handwriting. Ben, for when I am gone. I knew that handwriting. It was my grandfather's. He had been dead for 2 years. My chest tightened a little. Grandpa Walter had been sharp till the end. Always wrote in blocky, exact script, like he was building words instead of writing them. I remembered how he used to label everything with masking tape in his garage. Tools, cans, wire. All caps, all clear. I sat down at the kitchen table and just stared at it for a minute. The envelope was sealed with a red wax stamp. I almost laughed. Of course it was wax sealed. He never did anything halfway. I broke it open, the wax snapping like a dry twig. Pulled out a single sheet of thick, yellowed paper, folded twice. The first few lines were what I expected. Sentimental. He said he hoped I was happy, hoped I had found something worth building in my life. Talked about how proud he was of the man I had become. It sounded like the kind of thing you write when you know the end is near. But then, somewhere around the middle, his tone changed. The words got heavier. He said there was something I needed to know. Something he had kept to himself for decades. A secret buried beneath layers of family silence. And then he wrote one line that knocked the breath clean out of me. "Ben, I am not your grandfather by blood. And your father, Richard, is not your father either." That was it. Just that. No warm lead up. No gentle transition. Just a match dropped straight into the middle of my life. My hands started shaking. I kept reading, but the words were swimming now. And then I saw the next sentence. The one that changed everything. "Your real father was someone I once considered my closest friend. And what happened between us? It changed the course of this family forever." I dropped the letter. For a second, I just stared at the wall. And that was when I noticed something else. There was more in the box. Something wrapped in brown paper, heavy and flat, like a book or a binder. I reached for it with trembling fingers, not knowing what I was about to uncover. It was an old leather journal. Thick, worn, and tied shut with a cracked strap of suede. No title on the front. Just a rough W.H. etched into the bottom right corner, Walter Hart. My grandfather. Or not. The strap was stiff, like it had not been untied in years. When I finally worked it loose and opened the cover, the first page was dated July 23, 1973. The handwriting matched the letter, same exacting style, same clean lines. But the entries? They were something else entirely. It read like a confession, a slow, deliberate unraveling of a man who had carried something heavy for far too long. He started with the war, how he and a man named Raymond Callahan had served together in Vietnam. They had been close, maybe closer than anyone else in Walter's life, at least judging by how he wrote about him. Brothers, he said, not by blood, but by the kind of bond that only war forges. I kept flipping pages, barely breathing. Through Walter's words, I could see it all play out. Their friendship, the hardship, the trust they built under fire. And then, something shifted. By the time I reached the fall of 1974, the entries grew darker. Raymond had come back from deployment first. Got involved with a woman named Claire. That name hit me like a brick. Claire was my grandmother. Walter came home a few months later. And that was when everything started to fall apart. At first, it sounded like jealousy. Walter wrote about how he felt something was off. He mentioned late-night visits. Tension in the air. Then came the sentence I could not stop rereading. I betrayed Raymond. And I have lived with that choice every day since. What did that mean? The next few entries were a blur of anger, guilt, and cryptic lines about what happened that night. He never described it in detail, at least not yet, But one thing became clear. Something broke between them. Something so big that Walter cut ties with Raymond completely. And then, in the next entry, he wrote, Claire was already pregnant by then. She claimed it was mine. But I knew the truth. I stopped cold. Claire, pregnant. That would have been around the time my dad was born, or the man I had always believed was my dad. I shut the journal. My heartbeat was a drum in my ears. So if Richard was not Walter's son, and Walter knew that, then who was Richard's real father? And where the hell did that leave me? I looked back at the letter on the table. One line at the very bottom, in smaller print, suddenly made sense. Your answers start with that journal, but they will not end there. Look for the name inside the front cover. And be ready. I reopened the journal. Inside the front cover, scribbled lightly in pencil, was a name I had never seen before. Raymond J. Callahan, Ashford County. Ashford County. The name pulled something out of the back of my brain. A dusty corner I had not thought about in years. It was this small rural area about 2 hours north of where I lived now. Nothing fancy. I remembered my grandfather taking me up there when I was a kid to fish at some mossy little lake. We never stayed overnight. He would pack sandwiches, throw our rods in the truck, and we would be back home by dusk. I never thought much of it. Just another quiet trip with the man who always smelled like pipe tobacco and engine grease. But now I wondered, had he been taking me there for another reason entirely? I could not stop shaking as I pulled out my laptop and typed in Raymond J. Callahan, Ashford County. For a moment, nothing useful came up. A few old obituary listings, a veterans memorial page, some scattered genealogy forum hits. Then I found it. A scanned PDF of the Ashford County Veterans Association newsletter from 2006. There, on page 4, was a photo. Raymond Callahan. He was older, gray-haired, wearing a ball cap and sunglasses. The caption read, Raymond Callahan honored for service and lifetime achievement in Ashford community. The article said he had worked as a mechanic for over 30 years. Ran a small shop just outside of town. Never married. No children listed. Something about that last line hit me sideways. No children? If Walter's journal was telling the truth, then Raymond did have a child. My supposed father, which would make him my grandfather by blood. But he never knew. I leaned back in my chair, hands over my face. The kitchen clock ticked loud in the quiet room. A part of me still wanted to believe this was all some misunderstanding. Maybe Walter was just losing it at the end. Maybe the dates were off. But then I thought back to the one and only time I ever heard the name Raymond. I had been maybe 10 years old, sitting on the porch with Grandpa Walter. He was showing me how to oil a rifle. Not to shoot anything. He was always clear about that. Just maintenance, just knowledge. He said, a man should know how to take care of the things built to protect him. Then I asked, real innocently, did anyone teach you that, Grandpa? He paused, just for a second, a flicker of something behind his eyes. Then he muttered, Ray did. And that was it. He never explained. I never asked again. Back then, I did not think twice. But now, in the light of everything I had just read, I was seeing that moment through a new lens. Had that name slipped out by accident? Or was it intentional? Was Walter trying to tell me something, even back then? Suddenly, the silence in the room felt like pressure, like someone was waiting for me to put the next piece together. And then I saw it, tucked into the back of the journal, folded neatly like a secret someone was hoping would be found. A faded postcard. On the front, a picture of a lake with a wooden dock. I recognized it instantly. The place he used to take me fishing. On the back was a single sentence, written in that same steady handwriting. If you ever want to see where it began, go to the boathouse. There is more. The next morning, I got up before the sun. I do not know why I felt the need to go so early. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe I just could not stand sitting in my house for another second pretending the world was still the same. I packed a thermos of black coffee, threw the journal in my backpack, and headed north toward Ashford County, gripping the steering wheel tighter than I needed to. The roads were quiet, the kind that curved like they were following the bones of the land instead of fighting against it. I had not been up this way in years, but the landmarks started coming back. That rusted old diner with the flickering, open sign, the leaning white church near mile marker 37. And finally, the lake. It looked smaller than I remembered. The trees around it were taller now, casting shadows across the surface like fingers reaching for something beneath. I parked near the same gravel spot Walter always used. The dock was still there, a little warped, but standing. The boathouse sat at the far end, quiet. hunched over the water like it had secrets to keep. I stepped inside. It smelled like cedar and mold. There were cobwebs in the corners, and the boat Walter used to row out in was still hanging upside down from the rafters, covered in dust. But what caught my eye was the toolbox. Same red metal one he always kept locked with a padlock. As a kid, I asked what was inside once. He told me it was grown-up stuff. I figured it was just tools or maybe old fishing tackle. Now I knew better. The padlock was gone. The lid creaked as I opened it. Inside were just a few things: a folded-up envelope, a small leather pouch, and a key wrapped in wax paper. The envelope was labeled with one word: truth. I opened it and found another letter. Not from Walter this time, from someone else. The handwriting was different. Sloppier, unsure. It was dated October 4th, 1974. Walt, I know what you did. You think I do not, but I do. Claire came to me. She said it was over, said she had to stay with you for the baby. I never meant to ruin anything, never tried to take her from you. But I loved her, Walt. And I know the boy is mine. I know it. If you ever read this, just know I forgive you. But I will not come back. I cannot be part of that lie. That child deserves better than what we did to him. It was signed, Raymond J. Callahan. I sat there on the dusty floor, letter trembling in my hand. So it was not just a theory, not just guilt. It was real. Claire, my grandmother, had lied to both men. And Walter, he kept that lie going. Not just for his sake, but maybe for mine too. I opened the leather pouch next. Inside was a photograph, a black and white picture of Claire, young and smiling, sitting beside a man I had never seen before. But I recognized the jawline, the eyes. He looked just like my dad, which meant he looked just like me. That was Raymond, the man who had vanished from the story but never really left it. I sat there, staring at that face, my own face reflected faintly in the glassy surface of the lake just outside the open boathouse door. And suddenly, I had 1,000 questions, but only one name I could ask them to. Because below the photo was a note, scrawled in Walter's neat, final handwriting. If you are reading this, you have a choice. He is still alive. I must have read that sentence 10 times. He is still alive. It sat there at the bottom of the note like a challenge. Like Walter had been waiting for this moment to arrive long after he was gone. I stared out the boathouse door. The lake was calm, still like a held breath. And I felt that same stillness settle into my chest. Raymond Callahan was alive. Somewhere out there was a man who had no idea I existed. Or worse, a man who knew and had chosen silence. The question that hit me hardest was not where he was. It was, why did no one ever tell him the truth? I packed up everything carefully, the journal, the letters, the key, and headed back to the car. My thoughts were a mess. I kept flashing back to moments that had once meant nothing, but now felt loaded with meaning. Like the way my father, the man who raised me, Richard, always seemed distant. Civil, yes, but cold. Like a man doing a job he never asked for. At the time, I thought that was just how he was. Maybe he had trouble showing affection. Maybe I just reminded him of my mom too much. But now I wondered if it was something deeper. Did he know I was not his? And if he did, why raise me at all? Back home, I searched online again. I typed in Raymond Callahan plus Ashford County. I filtered by property records, phone numbers, public listings. And then I saw it. Callahan Automotive. Owner, R. Callahan. Same name. Same county. It had not closed. It had just moved to a side road a few miles out of town. The listing said, open Saturdays 10 to 3. I glanced at the clock. It was 11:42. I threw on a jacket and got back in the car. I do not know what I was expecting. Maybe some dramatic reveal, some shouting, tears, a name-drop moment that would unlock everything. Or maybe he would not recognize me at all. Maybe I would walk in, say my piece, and he would slam the door in my face. I drove anyway. The shop sat at the end of a gravel road, tucked behind some overgrown pines and a faded sign that looked like it had not been painted since the 90s. A single truck sat out front. The bay doors were halfway open. I parked and stepped out. As I walked up, I saw him. There was no mistaking it. Raymond Callahan was leaning over the engine of an old Ford, wiping his hands with a rag. He was tall, built like a man who had never sat behind a desk. Gray hair, sun-worn skin, thick arms, and those same sharp blue eyes. My eyes. He looked up when he heard my footsteps. Nodded politely. No recognition. He said, "You need something?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My throat went dry. I finally managed. I think you knew my grandfather. Walter Hart. At the mention of that name, his jaw locked. He said nothing at first, just stared at me like he was measuring something invisible. And then he muttered, "That a fact?" I nodded. My heart was hammering. Raymond wiped his hands again, slower this time. His voice dropped an octave. "You a friend of the family?" I swallowed hard. "No," I said. "I am family." Raymond froze. Just for a second. His hand stopped moving. The rag hung limply between his fingers. Then he looked me up and down, slower this time. Like he was trying to see something through me. Past the beard, the clothes, the tired eyes. Like he was searching for someone he had not seen in decades. Then he said one word. Soft. Quiet. Like a whisper that carried too much weight. "Claire." I nodded. "I am her grandson," I said. "Her son's son. Richard." His face twitched at the name. I saw it. A flicker of pain, regret, maybe even anger. He turned away, walked back toward the workbench without another word. For a moment I thought that was it. That he was going to shut down. Pretend I had never shown up. But then he reached into a mini fridge and pulled out 2 bottles of water. He tossed me one. "Sit," he said. I sat on an old milk crate by the wall while he leaned back against a battered stool. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then he said, "I figured this day might come. Never knew how. Never figured it would be you standing here, though." He took a long drink. "I wanted to be part of his life," he said quietly. "Your dad. But Walter made sure that never happened." I asked, "Did you know for sure that he was yours?" He nodded once, slow. "I knew. Claire told me before she married him. Told me she felt trapped. Said Walt gave her safety, gave her stability. And me? I gave her risk." He paused. "Back then, that was enough to make her choose him." I let that sink in. "Did you ever see him again?" I asked. Raymond's eyes turned distant. "Once. From a distance. He would have been 6 or 7. Walking with Walter, holding his hand. I was in town getting parts. I saw them across the street." He looked down. I almost called out. Almost ran across. But I didn't. I got in my truck, and I drove back to the county line. I drank until morning. We sat there in silence again. I felt like I was sitting next to the ghost of the life I never knew I had. Finally, I asked, "Why didn't you ever try again?" Raymond sighed. "Because by then, it would have been more about me than him. I told myself I would not rip open a kid's world just to ease my own guilt." He looked at me now. "But you're a grown man. You came here by choice." I nodded. I had to know. I read Walter's letter. I read yours too. That made him pause. My letter? It was in the boathouse. With the photo. And a key. He closed his eyes and let out a slow breath. That damn boathouse. I thought he would burn everything. His voice grew quieter. "There's a reason I stopped writing after that. I figured if Walt kept the secret this long, he'd carry it to the grave." He opened his eyes again. "But you're here. Which means he wanted the truth to come out after all." I stared at him, trying to find something familiar. Then I asked the one thing I had not been able to shake since I opened that letter. "Do you think I'm more like him, or like you?" Raymond smiled, sad but real. "I think you are about to find that out for yourself." I drove home with the key in my pocket. It had weight. Not just physical, though it was old and heavy like it belonged to some rusty lock in a forgotten place, but emotional, too. Like it was the last piece of a puzzle I had never known I was working on until this week. Raymond had not said much else after I left. Just clapped me on the shoulder before I got in my car and said, "Whatever you decide to do next, make sure it is for you. Not for him. Not for me. Just you." Back at my place, I laid everything out on the kitchen table. The letter, the journal, the postcard from the lake, the photo of Claire and Raymond, the letter from Raymond, the one Walter had tucked away for decades, and the key. I turned it over in my hand again and again. Then it hit me. There was one place I had not looked. Not in years. The attic at Walter's old house. Technically, it had been cleaned out after he passed. Most of it had gone into storage or to charity. I had walked through it once with my parents. Well, the people I had called my parents at the time, and signed off on a few things. But the attic had been locked. No one had the key, and everyone figured there was nothing up there worth the trouble. But now I was not so sure. I still had the spare key to the house. The realtor had not found a buyer yet. It sat empty, quiet, like it was waiting for someone to come back. That night, I drove over and let myself in. The house smelled like dust and wood polish. I walked through it slowly, my footsteps echoing a little too loud in the hollow space. When I reached the attic door, I pulled the key from my pocket. It slid in without resistance, turned smooth, and clicked. The door creaked open. Inside was darkness, and the scent of old paper, mildew, and something else, something chemical, like varnish and memories. I turned on my phone flashlight. There were boxes, dozens of them, labeled in Walter's blocky handwriting. Photos, service records, Claire, personal. But one box sat in the middle of the room, different from the rest. It had no label, just a small X in black marker across the lid. I opened it. Inside were items wrapped in cloth, carefully, intentionally. A child's baseball glove, a folded-up paper airplane with "To Dad" scrawled in faded crayon, a torn photograph, just the corner, showing part of a boy's face and a hand resting on his shoulder. And at the very bottom, a cassette tape in a plastic case, labeled in red ink. For Ben, when he is ready. My hands shook as I picked it up. Who even had a tape player anymore? I remembered Walter's old one was in the garage, that big silver recorder with chunky buttons. I searched until I found it buried in a box of tools. It still worked. I slid the tape in and pressed play. For a few seconds, there was just static. Then Walter's voice came through. Slow, tired, but clear. Ben, if you are hearing this, then you finally know the truth. Or at least most of it. He paused. I wanted to tell you myself, but I never could. I did not know how to look a boy in the eyes and say, I stole your name. Because that is what I did. I took something that was not mine and built a life around it. Your father, your real one, Raymond, he was a better man than I ever gave him credit for. And Claire, she deserved better than both of us. You deserve better, too. But I did love you, Ben. I hope you know that. Even if everything else I did was a lie, that part was real. The tape clicked softly. I sat there in the dark garage, staring at the recorder. The truth was no longer hiding. But it had not set me free either. Not yet. I did not sleep that night. Not really. I just laid on the couch with the tape recorder beside me, the journal open on the floor, and my own name running in circles through my head. Over and over again, Ben Hart. Ben Callahan. Ben Hart. Ben Callahan. I thought about my driver's license. My diploma. The paychecks with Hart stamped neatly across the top. The emails I had sent. The bills I had paid. Every single thing I had ever signed. All of it suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. Like I had been walking around in a costume stitched together by a man who thought he was doing the right thing, or at least convinced himself that the lie hurt less than the truth would have. But it was not just about names. It was about people. I thought about my dad, Richard, the man who raised me, technically, but never with warmth, never with interest. He was just there, like a placeholder, like he was doing a job that paid nothing and meant less. Now I understood why he kept his distance. Maybe he had known from the start. Maybe Walter told him. Maybe Claire did. Or maybe he figured it out on his own, saw the gaps and filled them in silently, without asking for confirmation. And me? I had gone all these years thinking it was something I had done, some invisible failure in me that kept him cold. But now I realized, maybe I had just been a living reminder of someone he hated, or someone he could never be. That realization hit me harder than anything else. It explained everything. The way Richard always looked through me instead of at me. The way he showed up to my graduation, shook my hand, and left before the photos were even taken. The way he never called on birthdays, unless Mom reminded him. The way he once said, when I was 15 and finally beat him at chess, "You must have gotten that from your mother's side." It had always been there, hidden in plain sight. And now that I knew, I could not stop seeing it. I grabbed the old photo of Raymond again, studied it, compared it to my reflection in the window. Same brow, same chin, same eyes, sharp and tired, and carrying too many unanswered questions. The difference was, I had a chance to ask mine. It was nearly dawn when I picked up my phone and called the number listed on the garage receipt from Callahan Automotive. After 4 rings, I got voicemail. Raymond's voice came through, gruff and low. "You got Ray. If I didn't answer, I'm either under a hood or out back. Leave a message." There was a long beep. I swallowed, then said, "This is Ben. I think I am ready to know the rest. Call me back when you can." I hung up, and I waited. Raymond called back that afternoon. I was sitting on my porch, watching the wind move through the trees like it was trying to say something in a language I did not speak. The phone rang, and I let it buzz once before answering. I did not want to sound eager, but I was. His voice was quiet, even rougher than the last time we spoke. I figured you might call. I said, I have more questions. He replied, I figured that, too. We met again the next day, back at his shop. He had cleared a space for us to sit, laid out 2 folding chairs under a hanging lamp. It felt more like a confessional than a conversation. I asked him everything, and to his credit, he answered. Yes, he had loved Claire. Since high school. Yes, they had been together before Walter returned from overseas. Yes, Claire had written him a letter when she found out she was pregnant, but then changed her mind and married Walter 2 weeks later. Raymond's voice cracked when he said that part. He did not cry, but he looked like he wanted to. He told me Walter sent him a letter after the wedding. One line stuck with him. He will never know you. That is how we keep him safe. I asked if he had ever tried to respond. He nodded. Once. But the letter was returned unopened. After that, he walked away. He built the shop. Stayed in the same town. Kept an eye out over the years, even when he said he did not. I always figured, he said, if life wanted our paths to cross again, it would make sure they did. Then he looked me in the eye. And now here you are. I asked him why he kept the journal, the postcard, the letter. He took a long breath and said, because I knew Walter would not carry it forever. He was not that strong. He acted like he was, but he needed a way out. I asked, do you think he ever regretted it? Raymond stared at the wall for a while. I think he regretted it every day, he said. But regret is easy. What you do with it, that is the part that matters. We sat in silence for a while, just breathing the same air, sharing the same blood. I had imagined this moment 100 ways. A hug, a tearful reunion, some speech that made everything click. But there was none of that. Just 2 men sitting in a shop, with a past neither of them could change and a future they still had to choose. When I stood to leave, Raymond said one last thing. You are not obligated to make room for me. But if you want, I would like to start over. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a photo, a copy of the one from the attic, only this time, complete, not torn. It showed Claire, Raymond, and a baby in her arms. My father. Raymond handed it to me. You should have the whole picture, he said. And this time, I took it. I drove home with the photo on the passenger seat, like it was something alive. I glanced at it more than once, like it might move, or whisper, or somehow make the last few days make more sense. But it didn't. It just sat there, quiet, undeniable. That night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, holding my ID in one hand and the photo in the other. One said heart, the other showed me where I really came from. And for the first time, I realized something. I could change the name, but I could not change the years. The scraped knees, the Christmas mornings, the late nights in the garage with Walter teaching me how to rebuild an alternator. Those were mine. No matter whose blood ran in my veins. And maybe Walter was not my grandfather by blood, but he was the man who showed up. He was the man who taught me how to fish, how to fix a leaking faucet, how to hold back anger when words hit too hard. He was the man who carried a lie, yes. But maybe he did it because he thought love could be enough to hide the cracks. I looked at myself, same eyes as Raymond, same jaw, same build, but not the same path. I would not let this make me bitter. I would let it make me honest. So I made a decision. I would keep the name Hart, not out of loyalty, but as a reminder that the truth will always find its way out, even if it has to wait until a man is gone and buried. A reminder that sometimes the people who lie to us also love us, and that both things can be true at the same time. I took the journal, the letters, the tape, and the photo, and I put them in a fireproof box at the back of my closet. Not to hide them, but to preserve them. Someday, I will tell the story, maybe to a son of my own, or a niece, or someone who wonders where they came from. But not today. Today, I just sit with the weight of it. And for the first time in a long while, it feels like mine.